Let me just start the video off with two things, right? One, he didn't list any sources for me to go cross-reference, which makes this a lot harder. But two, based on the title and the thumbnail, I hope y'all can tell that I am excited that somebody has intellectually stumped me, and it's not easy to find resources to disprove this thing, which, as somebody who's in the educational field in school, this is good. This changes my level of thinking and how I go about problem solving and everything. So this is a good challenge. I love a good challenge. I love a good puzzle, all these types of things. So I'm excited that he stumped me, and I hope you guys are excited for the video. It's a good one. All right, how you guys doing today? We're about to hop into a little reaction to first things first. Though, just want to make sure that I like the video. You already know what to do. Hit a little exit full screen, scroll just a little bit, like the video full screen and back up. You feel me? Proof that you can mess up your own intro even after probably over a year of doing it. Yeah, that's crazy. It's been a long time. We're about to come up on a 2-year inception of this channel. That's actually insane. Anyway, but before we get into it, I just want to make sure y'all keep an open mind first and foremost, right? I don't really care what your beliefs are, right? I care if you're not a Christian because, you know, I would like you to get saved. However, I know a lot of y'all are not going to care about the fact that I care about that, right? But just know that I do. But just keep an open mind. You know, we're going to get into something that is probably going to trigger a lot of people, whatever the case is. Try to have an open mind. Try to think about why you think what you think and all that jazz, right? I did that and I came to the conclusions I've come to. Hope you can do that, and whether you change your conclusions, stay the same in them, I hope that in the end you just think about more about the things that you think about, right? And my prospective job field is education, so this actually has a lot of practicality for me, right? Thinking what goals are there to be obtained through what somebody is teaching, and why do you think what you think? I actually just got finished on making a presentation about teaching students, well, not teaching students, but in reference to students, you have to know the goals that you're setting for them before you teach them, one, and two, you have to make sure that all your thoughts and beliefs have a goal before you even speak them, right? So what do you plan on doing? And then before you can even, so that's your end goal. Then you have to plan on what you're going to speak to get to that end goal, right? So anyway, we're
Let's
checking
talk.
out this video, which, sorry for that, is coming from Dan McClellan. This guy's been on my radar for a little bit, right? Haven't actually watched any of his videos, but he's been on my radar in the sense of, I've seen his channel. I think he was in somebody's comment section of some other video I reacted to or whatever, and he left an interesting comment, so I checked out his channel, seeing that he had some subscribers, and yeah, so we're checking out the Bible's first contradiction. Going through his channel, it was very hard to see whether he was a Christian or an atheist, and I don't think I ever got my full answer. Based on the title of this video, I think that it's clear question mark he's an atheist. Somebody in the comments can let me know. Other than that, let's check out what Mr. Dan got to say about the Bible.
Talk about the very first contradiction in the Bible. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the Bible's first contradiction is between the two different creation accounts that appear at the very beginning of Genesis.
All right, so off rip, I think I know where this is going. I think in one of the chapters it says that man was made and then animals, and then in the next one it's like animals were made and then man. However, this is very easily broken apart just based on the grammatical structure of the sentence. Same with how Jesus said it's better that a man be hung off a millstone and drowned than cause somebody else to stumble. It's not saying he would want you to do that. It's just saying it would have been better if you did that rather than cause somebody to stumble, right? So it's based off the grammatical structure of the sentence, but let's check this out, see what he's got to say. Maybe he's got something different.
One of these creation accounts runs from Genesis 1:1 through to the first half of Genesis 2:4. The other creation account runs from the second half of Genesis 2:4 through to the end of Genesis 3. And that second account is actually the earlier of the two accounts. So I'm going to start with that one. This one begins by talking about the day that God made earth and heaven. And earth is already there. The creation account never actually addresses the creation of heaven, but it starts with earth. Earth is there, but there's no plants, there's no animals, there are no humans. God causes a stream or a mist to rise up to water the ground. And then we have God creating, by manipulating the soil of the earth, a human. And the verb that is used for that creation is yatsar, which is the verb that is used to mean form and is frequently used to talk about the creation of pottery. And then God breathes the breath of life into the nostrils of the human, and they are a living soul. However, there's a problem. It's not good that the man is alone. And so God sets out to create a companion that would be suitable for the man, and begins by creating from the dust of the ground all the animals of the field and the birds of the air. None of them work out. Then God decides to create the woman from the side of Adam. So, important things to note here: God does not create by divine fiat. God creates by directly manipulating the raw materials of creation, and then their creation is initially not good. So they have to try to fix it, and their first attempt fails. So by trial and error, they manage to take their creation from a state of not good to a state of good. And in this account, the human is created first, then a garden is created, then all the animals of the field and the birds of the air are created. And finally, the creation ends up being good at the very end. That's the earlier creation account, and it also features an anthropomorphic corporeal deity who makes noise as they walk through the garden in the cool of the evening and has to manipulate the raw materials of creation. Now let's look at the other creation account, which was written later. And most scholars agree that this is the priestly creation account. This creation account was written by folks who were either members of a priestly class or were at least trying to advance the interests of a priestly class. And they are improving on the earlier creation account, and they are trying to supplant or supersede the earlier creation account. Their deity is a universal deity, and that deity does not create in a single day, but over 6 creative days, and then rests on the 7th. And it begins not by talking about the day that God made earth and heaven, but the beginning of God creating the heavens and the earth. So we've switched the order there, we've added more grammatical elements, and God creates not by directly manipulating the raw materials of creation, but by divine fiat, by speaking things, and then those things are created. And the 6 creative periods are very symmetrical, and they seem to be riffing on creation accounts from the middle of the first millennium BCE in Mesopotamia. The first 3 days of creation are about the creation of 3 different environments, and then the second 3 days of creation are about the population of those environments. So day 1 corresponds to day 4, day 2 corresponds to day 5, day 3 corresponds to day 6. And here, everything that God creates is good immediately upon creation. There is no need to try to correct anything. There is no trial and error. And again, creation is not done by directly manipulating the raw materials. It is done by divine fiat. And in this creation account, the plants and the animals are all created before the human is created. The human is the crowning achievement, the culmination of creation, and the human is created good from the very start and is male and female at the very point of creation, rather than male first and then the female being separated off from the male. So in all of the main beats of the creative story in Genesis 1:1 through 2:4a, we are improving upon what is going on in the earlier creation account. This is an attempt to retell the story of creation in a way that better fits the ideologies and the dogmas of the priestly authors. And so these 2 creation accounts directly conflict. Not only is the deity a very different deity, not only is the means of creation a very different means of creation, but also the order of creation is a very different order of creation. And you can tell that translators of the Bible are struggling with this, because you will sometimes see Genesis 2:19 mistranslated, where the Hebrew says, "Then God formed from the dust of the ground every animal of the field and bird of the air." And this is happening after the creation of the human. So all of the animals of the field and the birds of the air are created after the human. This conflicts with Genesis 1, and so some translators will mistranslate the verb as a pluperfect, and they will render in Genesis 2:19, "Now God had created from the dust of the ground every animal of the field and every bird of the air." That is a mistranslation, pure and simple, but it is an attempt to overcome the contradictions here. Now, there are people who will say, well, genre makes it all go away, as if the fact that these are 2 different creation accounts that use very different words, very different phrases, very different syntax and grammatical structures means that one is a historical narrative and the other is not. And so we can just ignore the fact that they contradict each other. And that doesn't work. They are both telling the story of creation according to historical narrative prose. They are saying this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. The genres, in that sense, are the same, and they are very clearly telling 2 different stories of creation. Some people will say that the creation account in Genesis 2:4b to the end of Genesis 3 is focusing in on the 6th day of creation. But that also doesn't work, because it begins by saying there was not yet any plant of the field or anything growing on the earth. And that took place before the 6th day of creation, according to Genesis 1. So they're just not reconcilable if you're actually taking the text seriously. Now, are the texts going to reach out and stop you if you try to reinterpret them in a way that harmonizes the two different accounts? Of course not. They're texts. They have no inherent meaning. They can neither clarify nor expound nor correct. So the texts are not going to stop you from imposing your will upon them and altering what they are saying so that they fit your dogma. If you want to force them into harmony with each other, the texts are not going to stop you. But we can be here to tell you that's not a plausible, much less a probable, much less a certain interpretation of these texts. It's only a not impossible interpretation. But if you want to take the text seriously, if you're concerned for the most likely reading, if you're concerned with what we can be sure of in relation to the origins of these two different texts, they contradict each other because they come from two different times and places and two different groups of authors, and one is intended precisely to improve upon, replace, and supersede the other. And that's the first contradiction in the Bible. And the fit for this video is Purple Rain.
Okay, so not to be a hater, right? We're gonna deep dive into this because that's where the fun is. But firstly, I just want to say that I'm going through some of these comments, and it's just like an echo chamber, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I always kind of, I like to see where an author of their work is at mentally by the people that are attracted to their work. So we got nothing contradicts itself from other religion. I find that Dan's approach to understanding the Bible makes it more worthy of respect than the typical evangelical Christian approach. Making the humans from dirt or clay sounds a lot like humans making gods out of clay. Love these, man. Thank you. Last time I was this early, there was only one creation account. Wow, after all these decades as a former fundamentalist, ordained minister, apologist, I didn't realize that 2:9 is commonly mistranslated. I'm actually unlearning the indoctrination and learning the crazy collection of fables that actually represents it. You're performing a great service, so God knows everything. Didn't know it wasn't good for Adam to be alone. In terms of interpretation, don't forget to add honest. Apologists are being disingenuous and twisting scripture to fit it into their dogma. It turned out to be turtles all the way down, right? So pretty much everybody in here is echoing what he's saying, that people getting it wrong, and this is a common misinterpretation, all that jazz. So we open up Genesis for ourselves, and I will be back with you. All right, so the first thing that he said was that God didn't create the earth. However, we can look, well, in the second account, God didn't necessarily create the earth, unless he was talking about the first one. We'll go back and check the first one. Actually, we can do that now. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay, so not the first one. This one, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Pretty much every translation says the same thing. Lord God made the earth and the heavens, 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 made, and all have earth, made earth and heavens, made earth and heavens. Elohim making earth and heavens. Yeah, so I don't really know where he got that from, but that's gone. Consistent though with what he said is God never said anything was good. However, we see that God planted a garden, and there he put the man who he informed. He did all this stuff, made the man. We go down here, it talks about the rivers and the gold that's in the land, commented on the man, saying everything you may eat, tree of knowledge of good and evil you shouldn't eat. And then after all that stuff, he said, it's not good that the man be alone. I will make him a help meet for him, right? So I'll make him somebody that's good for him. And out of the God, Lord formed every beast of the field, every fowl of the air, brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature, there was the name thereof. So that's consistent with what he said, right? Chapter 2, it has everything was made, then it seemed that it was not good, even though nothing was good, but he saw that this one thing was not good, right? So boom, in the first chapter, he does everything. God saw that it was good, bringing forth blah, saw that it was good, blah, lights of the firmament, made two great lights, firmament of heaven over the dark and the day. God said, let there be every moving creature that has life, and the fowl may fly above the earth in the open firmament. God created the whales and everything. God blessed them and all that stuff. Let him bring forth every animal and all these things. And he said, let's make man after our image and our likeness, that we may have dominion over the sea and all that stuff. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. He blessed them. He said unto them, be fruitful, multiply, and all this stuff. So I've given you everything, every herb, everything, every beast of the air, every fowl of the air, the sea, whatever. He saw that, and behold, it was good, and that was the sixth day. Upon reading the second chapter again, too, it appears that God had only told man not to eat of the tree, and then he created woman. And, he says this stuff, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh of my flesh. So this either implies that they share the same memory up until that point, or that, he told her after the fact, you can't really eat of this tree, because then the snake questions them and says, you can't eat anything in the tree. And then, there goes that. However, what I do like about the fact that of this video, though, you've seen me not really break down much of what he says is because he kind of stumped me. I'm not gonna lie, which is why I think the echo chamber is such a good thing, right? You don't really have any Christians in the comments going against what he says, which shows that not many Christians have stepped up to the plate in reference to what he said. Now, granted, that doesn't necessarily mean that what he says isn't true or isn't wrong, right? However, but that video was posted 2 weeks ago. Not one comment that I saw said anything different, right? I'm even on this Reddit post from a little bit ago. Every answer from Christian seems to be a little bit on the backbone, on the back fence. So, I might have to go do my research a little bit and come back with a part 2 to this video, which I didn't really necessarily want to do. I thought this would be pretty easy, but he raises a great point. However, can be a positive or a negative. What I'm about to say is that because the Bible's been around for so long, most points have already been discussed in length and already have some type of rebuttal to them. Like I said, can be a positive or a negative. You had so long to come up with an excuse, and then, and then now you just have an excuse on one hand. Or on the other hand, though, it's been around for so long, this is a new contradiction. And it's just like, bro, if you'd seen this and this, but you have to go into it and find that. Now, I will say on a last point, and I'm going to write these down so I don't forget them when I make a part 2 to this video, right? Because that's actually very important for me now. Not that I consider myself really an apologist, but I like being equipped with all this type of information and then disseminating it to you guys. And, obviously I'd be getting my pushback from the evolutionist community and the skeptical and the atheists and the agnostics and everything. However, what I mainly do this for is my own personal education, right? I'm not an expert. I'm not a scholar. I do this for my own education, and then whoever wants to listen, regardless of whatever fence they sit on. So I hope you guys can respect that. But the thing that I wanted to speak on was that there's two things. Firstly, I just read a thing that said that the first chapter starts with the days hypothesis, right? And this days hypothesis gives the notion of rest, which then lays the foundation for the Sabbath, right? And as such, laying the foundation for the Sabbath, that's pretty significant, seeing that if God did make the world in 7 days, then that would lead for the 7th day and the rest, and that would go on and inscribe itself in the law and fulfill itself through Jesus. And now he says you rest through all the time, right? That would be a multi-testament type of idea. Without the days, it doesn't necessarily indicate any form of rest. However, from chapter 2, the rest of the story is formed. It doesn't go on from the chapter 1 from the chapter 1 story. It goes from chapter 1 into a little bit of chapter 2, stops. Chapter 1 starts and continues through the rest of the Genesis story, which would indicate that chapter 2 is not only the older one, but also from which everything stems off of. And the first one might have been made in an attempt to be a little more descriptive with how the 7 days kind of ties into it, while ignoring the integrity of the second story being, if man was formed first, then the garden, then the animals, and then then the thing, rather than day one, this and that, and then everything, and then the man, then the woman, then everything. So maybe they forgot the integrity, maybe they messed it up, maybe some oral translations got wrong when there was some writing. I don't know. I'm going to do my research. I'm going to come back to you. But the reason I bring that up is because, in all honesty, that goes against my beliefs, in the sense that I always told myself the reason that I believe in Christianity for the most part is I trust a lot more of humans going through civilizations telling these things over and over. We got so many stories of oral tradition. So even though that these things are written down, even if they weren't, I'd trust the oral traditions passed down, because we have stories of stuff like the Odyssey, the Iliad, that is through oral tradition. Not necessarily saying that those things are true, right? Because they're not. However, I think that people being able to adequately say that these historical things happen and tell them through lines of oral tradition would be a pretty reliable source. However, they're also bolstered by the fact that they're written down as well, which I think lends a tremendous amount of credibility, then coupled with the fact that they have some historical things that we can point out within them and all this type of jazz. And some people may say, well, it's just historical fiction. Well, it's just fiction in general. And to me, I think there's much more than what meets the eye in regards to this. And that's the reason that I believe, and I call that my faith, right? However, to me, that's truth. I know a lot of people aren't going to call it truth. that's just how I think about it. You can let me know what y'all think in the comments. We're gonna do a part 2, and I'm actually pretty excited to talk about this. What I also want to bring up is how he didn't necessarily list any sources. It's very hard to try to disprove somebody when you don't list any sources. Some people would argue it's easier and you just say, well, you just bring up these things and then you disprove them. However, I don't know where he got most of his facts, so I can't even check the reliability or the credibility of those things. It's cool though. I'm gonna figure out what I gotta figure out. People trust Christianity for way too long for this to just easily throw a wrench in the first 2 chapters of Genesis and call it a day and pack it up, right? So I have faith that the answer is gonna be maybe not easy to find. However, it will be sufficient. All right. Hope you guys have yourself a fantastic rest of your day. Peace.